So just a little background about LevelCloud. LevelCloud is a cloud computing, cloud integrator, cloud service provider. We specialize in the legal vertical, and we have quite a few law firms all over the country that have transitioned from on-premise computing to cloud computing. And so we are basically taking all of the questions that we get asked by these law firms, and we are addressing it and made an educational series out of it. So that's the brief background. Patrick, would you like to add anything before we move forward?
I would like to say that if you do want to see tune into any of our older webinars, we can provide those for you. They'll both be on our website, or by request we can send you just so you can catch up. We've already done 3 parts. So I don't want any of you to feel like you've been left out or left behind. We'll absolutely get you caught up. Most of these webinars, I try to make them so they're all related. They follow a lesson plan. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to let me know in the chat box. I will address them as they come. So, Biren, if it's okay with you, I think we should move on. I just wanted to get into the facts before we get started.
Perfect. Let's do it.
All right. All right, excellent. So the first thing I wanted to cover, just some basic background regarding any cyber incidents and issues. The United States is actually the #1 target for hackers around the world. Now, this is significant. If you can see this map, there's a map on the left side of your screen. You can see the U.S. is, if you add it all up, a very, very, very large portion. Then there's hacktivism in the lower left corner. You can see cyber espionage. For those of you who don't know, hacktivism, it's a form of hacking for, the purpose adhering to a cause. We believe in this cause, so we're going to hack and put a message up about this, and that's hacktivism. It's like activism, but cyber activism. So if you see the chart on the right side, you can see the motivations behind cyber attacks. Cybercrime is #1, 59%, almost 60% of all attacks. And that was in October 2014, so very recently. Cyber espionage came in second, hacktivism, surprisingly, #3, and then cyber warfare. This is significant. If we want to understand how much crime is going on the web, it's just insane. It's so much, and we are the #1 target. So the fallout from this it has the potential to be very damaging. So I'm going to move on. I'd like to show you some more facts and statistics. Biren, do you have anything to chime in? Yeah.
Yes, on this particular graph, and I think it's very insightful to see, and you can see how U.S. has, of course, the highest concentration of attacks, but you can also see countries like Pakistan and India on this left side in the green chart. So there's a lot of cyber warfare, each other damaging each other's website. So I thought it was pretty interesting to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's very interesting to see it in perspective like this. You see different countries have a different concentration. U.S. it's cybercrime, theft of client information. We see targets attacks. We see other big name corporations falling prey to these breaches. And Pakistan and India, well, not so much. They are more into the cyber warfare against one another. That's an excellent point, Biren. Thanks for bringing that up. So on our next slide, I'm going to share with you what is the impact from all this. I just generally want to quantify all this. How much is actually damaged? Let's understand first what causes damage. Now, there are security events and there are security incidents. Now, if you see that chart on the top, annually 91 million security events. Now that may seem pretty, daunting, like, wow, there's no protection against this. Well, let me make this clear. Security events, they're noticeable changes in an information system that should not be there, but they don't affect critical components. So you may have, a password stolen. That's an event. If it's not used, if you can protect against that, you have a recovery plan saying, oh, no problem, we know it's stolen, let's change that password. That is an event. Now, it gets dangerous. Then we get into security incidents, and you can see annually 109, monthly about 9, weekly on 2 on average. That's up 12% this year. That's significant. Incidents are any attacks intentionally carried out by a human being, or what we call a botnet, somebody who sets it up to automatically, inflict harm. This is one of the major things that we're facing. These are big attacks. They have big implications. But it's also important to remember that not every event is an incident. So just because your password got stolen doesn't mean all of your client data is compromised. That's important. But what specifically can incidents cause? If you look at the bottom, 29% have reported reputation and brand damage. Okay? So of those incidents, 29% have had brand damage. And we know this because we're the consumer. We can see Target. We can see all the other consumers. We can see, if you remember back, TJ Maxx had security breaches. Now we recognize that. We correlate those names to this. 21% reported lost productivity, and another 19% lost revenue. You do not want this, and there is a way to prevent against the damages, financially speaking, from this fallout. Biren, do you have anything to chime in on this? Do you have an opinion?
Yes, I think this is an excellent opening to the webinar because we are trying to establish the difference between an event and an incident. And I have a couple of examples that will make it a little bit more clear for our audience. So let's take, for example, a system administrator in your company came to you and or to the management team and say, well, I think that the system is broken, and that's considered an event. He thinks, right? And take, for example, an incident where now he comes to you with a log or some tangible proof that there's suspicious activity going on in our environment, in our network. Another example would be a user coming to the IT department and saying, hey, I think that we may have been hit with a virus. That's an event. But an incident would be that the system starts behaving in a strange manner, and it appears to have been infected with the virus. So take, for example, that crypto virus that just a lot of companies got impacted with. It was Patrick. Can you expand on that a little bit, on that particular virus?
Absolutely. CryptoLocker is generally what we refer to it as. It's a form of ransomware. Now let me explain really quickly what ransomware is. A hacker will exploit a vulnerability. They'll get control of your computer, and they will make the session anonymous. So their IT department can't know what's going on, and the management doesn't know what's going on, only the hacker and the victim. Now what happens is the hacker will say, hey, I have all your files, and if you don't pay this amount of money in 3 hours, and they usually have a countdown clock in some cases, we will encrypt your data and you will never get it back. Now, you don't want to get to this point, but if you do, this is what we're talking about when it becomes an incident. Now you've graduated. You've graduated from having an event. I got a suspicious email. It should not have come through that mailbox. When the person clicks on it, when the user clicks on it, and they get that message, hey, you better pay up, that becomes an incident, if that makes it clear.
Yes. Perfect.
I'm going to go, sorry about that, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So this is all scary. Man, if it's going to happen, what am I going to do? Well, we have a few solutions. What can we do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things that has been around, and it has been around for 10 years, is cyber liability insurance cover. And I know I'm jumping around it here, but I think this particular insurance policy has been around for over 10 years. The problem is that it's just there's not been that much adoption. And now with the advent of cloud computing, and now in the last couple of years we've seen several data breaches, this has come to the limelight. Another issue with the adoption with CLIC, or Cyber Liability Insurance Cover, CLIC, is that there has not been a good understanding amongst insurance companies themselves on what types of risks they need to insure for. And so, and at the same time, the security folks, people who are speaking and who are in the business of risk mitigation and or transfer of risk have not, learned enough about how to handle risk, how to transfer this risk. And now we are talking about this today because of all these breaches that have happened. So keep that in mind. Click is something that we'll be talking more in this webinar as we go along, and what should be covered in your policy and things like that. So let's focus on this. Now, Patrick, this is really alarming. We just covered all these numbers, right? But look at this, 63% of breaches in the federal government and 87 in the private industry. So private industry could be anything from any small businesses to mid-sized businesses, large businesses, right?
That's right. Federal is just that, federal government. Main reason for this is because there are some more careful policies in place in many federal organizations. They have a lot more oversight. So that's why you see that, the difference between those statistics. But let me say this. As much as we don't like to hear this, the number one cause that of breaches really is the user error. And there are things that we can do to protect, somebody clicking on a link, but in fact, if you don't have sound policies in place and you don't enforce those policies, people will fall into the traps, like those crypto locker traps. Maybe, the user should not have been going to a certain site. I'm not saying that is the reason, but those are the policies that we need to make sure we're enforcing. And our next webinar will actually cover, sound policy creation, enforcement, and such. So we're going to get more into that in our next series, but, the final installment of this series. But I want to point out, developing sound policies will help prevent information from being leaked and things from being compromised. And then you have to enforce those policies. It's not good enough to say, listen, you better make sure you lock the door on the way out. That's our policy. But if you don't make sure the person has a key, if you don't make sure you watch them lock the door on the way out, your policy has failed. And that's what we see with the 63% and the 87%. These breaches had policies. They occurred due to policies not being followed. Now, we know this will happen. Humans make mistakes. We make errors, and that's understandable. So what can we do? We can obtain a cyber liability insurance policy, just in case. This will help us avoid, losing the client's trust. Yes, there will be an instant, but if it does occur, you can say, hey, we took the necessary precautions. We have insurance. You're covered. You avoid costs of recovery. The insurance policy will help protect against this. So I'd like to move on.
So Patrick, then in that case, what you're saying here is that the cyber click, I'll say the short form, the click is required regardless of whether a firm has IT assets on premise. In other words, their data center is local to their office, or if they are working with a third-party vendor where their data is stored in a data center in the cloud. Regardless, the firm is exposed, and they need to have click just in case.
That's right. That is absolutely right. And they are passing legislation to require, if you hold client data on the web or on a server, doesn't matter if it's connected in any way, shape, or form. If you have client data at your site, you must have the necessary protections in place. You have an obligation to protect their data. So yes, you're absolutely right, Biren. This is required, and it's going to be, you're going to see this a lot more in the future become a necessity. It's going to be like car insurance. You have to have it if you operate on public roads. It's going to be very much like this. We have technology highways, we have physical highways, and you're going to need insurance to run on both, and that's just the fact of the matter.
Right. Another important point to mention here is your general policies that you might have in place typically does not cover the types of breaches that you may see happen, loss of data or multimedia extortion. We talked about extortion, network security. Some of those things may not be covered under your general policies that you may hold. So it's extremely important to speak to your broker about cyber liability policy click. And in many times even recommend, many of our clients have sought brokers that are not their standard broker that provides the general liability insurance, because such a specialized field that many times the insurance brokers don't even understand what is covered, what is not covered, exclusions, things like that. So we recommend going to or finding a specialist insurance broker that specializes in click.
That's right. That's absolutely right, Biren. And we're actually going to cover, you know, the benefits and, you know, shortcomings of click. And we'll get into that in another section. We'll mention some of the shortcomings. But for right now, I actually want to go into some reasons why you should get cyber liability insurance. So let me go ahead and move on. I'm just going to wait for it to load up for everyone. Okay, so I've outlined 5 reasons to get cyber liability coverage. The number one reason, not in order of importance by any means, but the first reason, affordability. There are plans available for as little as $2,000 a year. So, you know, you can purchase a better policy. They're available, but if you want a low entry level of insurance, this is what you can find it for. Again, like Biren said, you want to speak with a specialist who knows more about what is actually available and what is actually covered, and we'll guide you. We'll give you some guidelines on what to look for you know, a great policy. But you can have them for that price. Now, Biren, I mean, is that something you think you'd want to spend on to have a policy? Is that something fair, something, you know, reasonable?
Absolutely. I mean, as a cloud computing vendor, we of course have taken a lot of time and done our due diligence to make sure that we are covered for any sort of breaches. And the way we did it is we kind of came up with all these different things, and then we went to the broker and said, okay, these are the types of breaches that can happen, you know, or these the types of incidents that may happen, and now tell us what policies cover us and things of that nature. So we had to work backwards, and we actually recommend that firms do that due diligence themselves. You know, have a core group of people in the law firm and circulate what types of risks are there today, like what, you know, if you are running a practice management system or your document management system, how are you managing? Are you paperless office, or if you have all this paper sitting around, how are you protecting, securing things? Just kind of do your due diligence internally. If you have IT department, it gets a little bit easier, but if you don't have an internal IT department, you can always reach out to your consultant or your third-party provider for these for more information. I would say that we have Thomas Slaughter. I would like to bring on the call if he is there. So Patrick, can you see if you can enable him? He's our CIO, and he might be able to chime in. And if he's not, that's fine. Thomas, are you there?
Yeah, I'm getting Thomas on right now. Sorry, I just need to.
Yeah, I was going to mention that Thomas has a lot of experience in looking at several different cyber liability policies and comparing them for many of our clients. So we've been telling our clients that yes, we are protected, but you need to have your own policy in place, you know, to protect your own firm. And so it's been very interesting to see different quotes from different vendors and see which vendor is covering what, and helping and guiding some of our clients.
We're just waiting for Thomas to get on the line.
Okay, well, we'll bring him in, but you can keep going with the coverage part.
Sure. So the next thing I want to talk about, obviously, is coverage. In general, there are 2 types that you're going to see, two general types of coverage that you're going to see. The first being first-party coverage. Now, this protects against costs that relate to notifying clients of a breach. This can be very costly, especially if you're a larger company, a larger firm. If you have 500,000 clients or customers, the price can get up there to send a message or a notification, or millions of customers. You're going to run into a lot of cost notifying them about one specific instance. And you can lose productivity from taking the time to do that. And that's one of the, unfortunately, one of the pitfalls of, social responsibility. Hey, are we going to get out in front of this thing and take care of it, or are we going to stay in the shadows and just hope it blows over? No. The responsible thing to do is notify, and you'll be rewarded for that. First-party coverage is designed to protect against the costs associated with notification. And that's one of the benefits of having the coverage. Your second form, business interruption. This protects against severe loss of revenue. So say the breach comes in, you did your due diligence, you notified the client, but we have to pay to get their credit cards changed, or we have to reimburse them for fraudulent charges. Not every policy is going to cover that, but in general, those types of instances are what's covered under business interruption. So you'll see, a wide range of, policies. Just like any kind of insurance, you have multiple options, and you're going to want to get with a specialized broker, somebody who knows exactly what you need, tailor it to your firm. But in general, you have first-party coverage, which is the lower level, and you have business interruption, a different type. So I'm going to move on. There are 3 more reasons. Biren, before I move on, I would like to see, is there something you'd want to add to that?
No, I think I'm good. You can keep moving along, and conference Pat Thomason, so he can chime in.
Okay. Give me 1 second. All right, Biren. Let me share the screen for you. All right, so the next 3 reasons, let me make sure, I have to make sure it loads for all of our audience. There we go. Okay. The next 5, the next 3 reasons are, do you have the resources in-house? And this is just very basic. Do you have the manpower in-house to manage your risk? Do you have the people, do you have specialized people that say, hey, we're going to advise you not to do this, or we're going to advise you to do this, get out in front of this? Do you have somebody who's specialized in breach and cybersecurity that can advise you? Having a policy, you can avoid these costs by having these in-house people, because you have, a team of people behind you saying, hey, it's policy, we're going to cover you, this is what it covers. You need to do this, you need to do that. And it avoids the cost associated with having risk management teams. Now, you do have an obligation to clients to keep data safe, no matter what industry you happen to be in. You need to keep your clients' data safe. And no matter the platform, the risks are always there. It is a reality. And essentially, like we stated before, it's going to become mandatory. There's already legislation in the works that's going to make it mandatory to have it. That's a great reason to get it, because you have to have it. Another thing, Biren mentioned this earlier, actually, and thank you for mentioning that, Biren. Conventional policies don't cover cyber breaches, and most don't. Unfortunately, that's not built into the current policy that you may have, any liability policy. So your current liability coverage may not include protections. Those couple that we mentioned earlier, first party, it's not going to be in your general liability policy. So Biren, do you want to chime in on this?
No, I think we covered this already, so we can move along. I think our audience seems to be pretty, now they understand they need to do it and why they need to do it. I think it will be nice to get Thomas's opinion on what he has seen, and that would be very valuable for our audience today.
Sure, sure. I mean, I'm still trying to get Thomas on the line, so.
Patrick, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thomas, can you hear me?
All right. Yes, I am. I'm online now.
All right, excellent. So, well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And I'm going to move on to what should a good policy include. And I think, Thomas, you'd be the best person to explain this to our visitors. So let me go ahead and share that. So, Thomas, when you're ready, take it away, sir.
Excellent, excellent. So what should a good policy look like? A lot of times you'll get a lot of variable type of policies. As you see kind of in this day and age, the more incidents that occur that become kind of more wide stream, say things that happen like in Target and things of that nature, you'll start seeing a lot of policies start omitting things or adding exclusions that it would be almost next to impossible for you to collect unless, you know, the moon, the stars, and everything align in the incident of a breach. So some of the things I definitely would look at, you know, on the base of a good policy, one is privacy breach response services. And what that simply is, if you have an event, as Biren explained, or an incident, some says maybe insurance companies may explain, is what kind of financial backing you would have to address that type of breach. And response services is anything from, we'll say, sending somebody in to check your systems and make sure it's secure, to also provide funding for legal proceedings, also to provide funding in the event that you're sued by, say, one of your clients for loss of data. And you want to make sure that in those privacy breach responses, it's a lot of different variables, and you want to identify what you are covered under, what type of breaches. And again, they're all over the place, but definitely the major things you want to make sure is that you do have funding for any litigations, that you do have funding to support the fact if something was to occur, say, to your client's data, and they decided they wanted to try to pursue you, you want to make sure that there's definitely funding there. And you want to also make sure how much funding per incident. That's kind of another thing you definitely want to look at. Yes, you could be protected, but up to how much? It may be $10,000 per incident, even though that you have $1 million policy. So just to touch on that. The other thing is notification identity monitoring. You want to make sure your policy has notification identity monitoring, meaning typical policy would probably provide funding per person affected by breaching your systems. Say, for example, the situation that happened with the individual who took his laptop home that worked for the Social Security Department, and his laptop was stolen, and it had something upward 10,000 Social Security numbers for the VA hospital. Well, each of those individuals, you want to be able to give them something to ensure that their data or their privacy is protected. And this is what this would definitely cover. We'll sit there and say, well, if your client's private information, we'll say Social Security, for example, is stolen from your system, what type of services could you offer in your policy that will ensure or help them protect their identity? And that's what notification identity monitoring would be. It would monitor their privacy, we'll say Social Security number, just like it was LifeLock. And it would sit there and ensure if anything was to happen that they would be alerted that somebody tried to utilize their personal information for whatever reasons. Another thing is regulatory proceedings, defensive penalties. Regulatory proceedings would be more in HIPAA compliancy, would be something upon PCI compliancy, or would be maybe a federal or some type of local government kind of compliancy for your particular, what you particularly practice. And you want to be sure there's funding in that policy for those type of proceedings, aside from privacy breach. So you can have actually funding set aside for privacy breach and regulatory proceedings. And if you're fighting litigations or going through some type of situation with your client, in addition to regulation, so we'll say a government proceeding, your policy should be able to cover to provide some type of back-end for both of those. The other thing is listed PCI fines and costs. So if you were fined, and let me back up a little bit here, for PCI, that is for the Credit Card Privacy Act in general. It's a PCI compliancy. If you were to store information of your clients, more so credit card information, in your servers, then you would fall under PCI compliancy. And if you were to violate that compliancy, if the credit card information was stolen, just in the instance of Target, then your policy should protect you as far as the monies that will be paid out to those first parties that had an impact for the PCI, as well as the PCI fines. The next one would be data asset recovery expenses. Now this one is a little tricky because I've seen a lot of different policies where it's, they have a lot of these weird little exclusions. But for the most part, you want it to, in a situation where if you were to lose your data, if it was behind a breach, or if somebody was to steal the data, or just if your servers were just to crash, you want to have that in your policy. It's like a protection plan for the data and the recovery, the expense it costs to recover that data. And a lot of times I've seen the expense to recover that data run into the tens of thousands, about into the six figures, all depending on how much data. So you want your policy to make sure you have a very sound data asset recovery expense built into that. The multimedia coverage here, with the multimedia coverage, you want to make sure, and what the multimedia coverage does, it helps you protect yourself from if you were sued for infringement or if you were sued for violating a trademark through a website or one of your clients. And it's simply just stating, I didn't know that I was infringing. I did not know that, hey, I didn't do a malicious act to violate somebody's, rights to some type of trademark. It's just protecting you. If they came after you, then you can pull your policy to sit there and say, yes, I'll let my insurance handle it and protect me from this lawsuit. And they'll give you a lawyer. They'll go ahead and go to bat for you as a client. Then last but not least, this is a biggie in my mind, because you definitely want to prevent any of the six preceding incidents from happening through complimentary access to breach protection and prevention day training. With that, all simply saying your policy should come with, some type of preventative program. If it's documentation for your staff, if it's training for your staff, a good insurance company will provide that for you. It's in everybody's best interest, because obviously they don't want to have to pay out a claim if it was a way to prevent it. So that's a key factor I've seen with a lot of different policies, is that they will provide training, they will provide the necessary tools to help you follow best practices, even according not just your industry or your vertical, which may be the legal, but just to everything in general, from a federal down to local government, and they're really good with that. So
Thomas, I think you did a fantastic job explaining all these points, but I think this last particular point is so important, isn't it? Because the weakest link in the security spectrum, when we look at it, we can have the best security in the world and all kinds of things you can think of, from file auditing and two-factor authentication, all the fancy buzzwords and technology. However, it takes just the user doing something so simple and so lame, and easily it can, they can breach the best of the security, right?
And you're 100%. I'm happy you chimed in, Biren. Actually, that's a huge factor. And let me back even to the data asset recovery that should be built in the policy. You would not realize it, but a lot of times it's an exclusion built into policies stating if you were to do something, it's just like not reasonable balance, just by your best efforts to protect the data. If you can do something that kind of undermine the integrity of the data, and that may not just be a managing partner, that just might just be an associate or an assistant, and they find out something was did out of, that didn't seem, logical, they could actually sit there and say, well, we're not going to pay out this claim. And that's where it comes back down to the training, that you should definitely want to make sure your staff is properly trained to avoid, putting yourself in a situation where you're being sued and your insurance company is not protecting you, because they will build that exclusion in there. And that's a lot of times why they even provide the training, to saying, okay, well, you guys didn't do the best practice by simply locking the computer and walking before you left and go to the restroom.
Right. That's an excellent point. Yeah, these days, the attacks are getting even more sophisticated. They're circumventing the spam filters. No matter what the best spam filters you might have, phishing scams are happening all the time, and so it's a constant battle, in this space. And Thomas, you're so right. Training is extremely critical for the end users, that they go through a mandatory training on how to best, and companies also maintain a policy, internal security policy of how to use the internal resources, locking computers, changing passwords. Earlier we spoke about that. Many times people have push back, and say, no, we don't want to change passwords and things like that. And so the enforcement is not happening, although the policy is there. And then you get hit with a breach, because you haven't changed your passwords or they were not strong enough, and then you find out then your policy doesn't cover it.
And you're absolutely right. And it's interesting enough, when I fill out cybersecurity policy, a lot of times, Biren, as you know, our clients reach out directly to me to help them, fill out their policies. And a lot of the time is, do they have incident reporting? Then it's just the most simplest things that they ask for that can even change how expensive your policy can be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge variable. Or where is your data at rest? Is it secured in the proper manner? Two-factor. It's all these different variables. And when you're filling out that the application for the policy, these things don't pop up until a lot of individuals' minds, or managing partners' minds, until they look at it. Then we'll sit down and we'll say, well, it's the simplest things you can do to protect yourself. It's the very smallest things.
It's an excellent point, Thomas, because not all cloud providers are equal, and some, as we mentioned earlier, there are policies as low as 2,000. So if you were not doing anything in the cloud, or if you just wanted some basic coverage, you can get away with 2. But we have seen policies go as high as $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $10,000, right? I mean, it all depends on the type. And it's all about handling the risks, right? Because if you are, as you're filling out the questionnaire, you're saying, yeah, I've got file auditing, I've got two-factor authentication, I encrypt my data at rest, I do all these things. Well, the insurance company is going to look at this and say, wow, they're doing all the best practices that, the federal government and all these people are doing, so, let's give them a better quote on the policy, right?
Correct, exactly.
Okay, cool.
That's
Good
yeah.
to know.
Yeah, well, thank you, gentlemen, for your input. Thomas, I was wondering if you can speak to us a little bit on policy pitfalls. I'm going to go ahead and move on in just a moment, but can you share your thoughts on this? What is the downside? What makes cybersecurity insurance policies not so perfect, so to speak?
Oh, and absolutely, great question there, Patrick. Well, the 4 key things I commonly see in the policies I've reviewed is the retention claim amounts, exclusions, endorsements, and sublimits. And I'll go into each one of those here now. With the retention claim amounts, it's simply a deductible. Say, for example, if you're in a vehicle, you get into a car accident, in most cases you have a $500 deductible, $250, $1,000. At worst, I think I've seen personally. However, with cybersecurity or cyber policies, it's the same concept. When you do have an incident, there is going to be a deductible, and you want to make sure your deductible is something that you can live with. I've seen them typically around $10,000 per incident, sometimes a little lower, around $5,000 per incident, but it's kind of, what do you feel comfortable with, and something you should discuss with your insurance company as far as, how do I make sure my retention claim amount is at the minimal? But is, probably the less it goes down, the more your month-to-month is probably going to go up. The next thing is exclusions. Exclusions. I can't say that enough. You will sit there, a lot of times they'll get this nice fancy policy, then they'll put these small weird, we'll say, numerals next to the policy or under it that says exclusion. Then they're going to have you jump over to some type of document outside the policy to read the exclusion. And next thing you'll know, probably what's that data asset expenses, I think is a huge one I always see. There's all these just weird exclusions. I've seen them where, they won't cover you if it's water damage. It doesn't cover you if it's smoke damage. If it's an act of God, we hear that all the time. If there's some type of act of God, it will not cover you. And this, I think, why a lot of times there's a lot of strength in the cloud, because for a cloud data center to get a certain type of designation or, some type of accreditation, we'll say, per se, they have to have these file suppression systems, and they have to have all these different things built into it, including the replications. And that's something where you're going to have to worry least about, falling to the exclusion of your data loss. But if you have your servers in-house, then you have to really pay real close attention. If something was to happen to this server, what exclusions is being implemented to my policy that is going to prevent me from collecting in the event that something happens. And this also happens to breaches as well. did we take every reasonable action to prevent the breach? And I'll tell you right now, insurance companies are going to fight hard, especially if it's a big claim, to try to find where you were at fault. And I could probably give you one case example. It was a particular client. They had a local server on premise that failed, and I actually had to go down there to meet with their forensic scientists that came from back east to sit there, and they went through every trick in the book. They pulled every tool I could imagine, even beyond my thoughts, and I think I'm pretty good at IT, to try to figure out or bring that server back online so they could prevent from paying out that claim. And this is a real-life instance I actually had to go through. And long story short, you know, the situation, it was a claim that they were able to get, but the fact, the things that the insurance company went through to avoid, I think, paying that out definitely attests to, you know, you have to really pay real close attention to the exclusions. Endorsements. Endorsements is just pretty much add-ons or extra little things to the policy. So you'll get a basic cyber liability kind of policy that's pretty basic, and endorsements is kind of things they throw into there, and endorsements that may include exclusions or add-ons to your policy. So a lot of times when you're going through those, pay real close attention to your endorsements to find out, because, you know, multimedia might be an endorsement, but you want to find out what's built to have the endorsement as well. It's very important to understand those, because in those endorsements, they also might have exclusions built into them. And those exclusions may be kind of the pitfall to why you don't get paid out on your policy. Then the sublimit. Sublimit is just basically what they will pay per incident. So say, for example, if it's a PCI, or better yet, if it's something for notification or monitor for a client in the event that you're breached, well, how much would each client get? What would be the sublimit for each of those clients? And it's very important you pay attention to those sublimits, because it may not be enough for what you think is the appropriate thing. You know, you definitely have to make sure you pay close attention. A typical sublimit I could see per breach, say, for example, if it was for the notification monitoring, it's probably somewhere around $10,000 per user. Or if it was, say, a breach per computer, maybe something around $10,000 per user, and that's probably like on $1 million policy. So that's pretty typical. Then the other thing about a policy is, you know, yes, you say you have $1 million, but the $1 million is what's considered aggregate, meaning that they will pay up to $1 million for each, you know, for so many incidents. So that's another thing you definitely want to look at, is the aggregate and how much you can really get paid out for these incidents.
Fantastic,
That's right.
Thomas. I appreciate very, very detailed information on all of this. And for those of you who are attending, this is being recorded, so you can always feel free to raise your hand or let us know, and we'll be happy to post it on our website, and you can watch it anytime.
So at this time, Biren, and thank you, Thomas, again for your insight on this subject. At this time, I wanted to launch a series of polls. I have just 3 questions that I'd like to ask the audience. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll right now. It's, do you currently hold a cyber liability insurance policy? Now, we don't have any data on who answered what. It's completely anonymous, but I just want to get an idea. We'd like to get an idea, and I'll kind of explain why after we close the poll. We have a few voting still. I'll leave it open for a few more seconds. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Looks like 100% of you said no. This is not to be alarmed. There's no cause for alarm for this, but just to give you an idea of how new this is. You know, if you would imagine, how many of you don't have car insurance? None of you. You'd all say, hopefully, say yes. And what we're trying to show you, this is such a new thing, but it is so important. It's going to become mandatory. So to give you an idea, you know, 100% of you said no. Now, the next question, what would prevent you from obtaining a cyber liability policy? I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. You should have access to it now. The top reasons I came up with would be cost, lack of information, which hopefully after this webinar you have a much better understanding. Irrelevance, it may not, you don't feel like you need it, or current policy already covers cyber incidents, or other. So for those of you, I have some answering lack of information. Please, please, please don't hesitate to contact us. We'll be more than happy to explain more, give you more information. That's our job. So I'm going to leave it open for just a little bit longer. Okay, still. So cost and lack of information. These are things we can go into more detail later. If you feel free to contact us, and we can give you some more information.
And we can also put our people in touch with some insurance brokers that we know of. Again, we're not linked with any of them, but folks that we network with in the industry and we think are pretty qualified, we can always put them in touch with them as well.
Right. Thanks, Biren. And I have just one more question. We asked, I wanted to get an idea of, do you currently have it? What is preventing you from having it? And now I want to ask, how important is it? So yes, it's expensive, it's cost, but do you need it? Is it important to you? Is this something that you're currently looking at? Okay. Okay, excellent. Getting all over the board on this one. Okay. Okay, looks like we have 75% moderately important and 25% very important. 80% moderately important. So at this time, Thomas, if you're there, can you please kind of reiterate the importance of having this kind of coverage to our audience?
Well, absolutely, and I don't know if any of the audience kind of seen, there was an article written, I can't recall, not too long ago here, but there was, and I'll leave the law firm out of it, but there was a pretty huge law firm back east that deals with patent and deals with intellectual property, and the organization that they were actually, doing the work for is what's called for the legal for the particular business. Well, their servers and everything was pretty locked like Fort Knox. Well, the hackers, particularly out in Russia, figured out the easiest way to extract data from some of these big, huge companies that have these, tremendous patents and have these tremendous intellectual property was to look at the law firms. Because what was it about the law firms? Well, law firms aren't really governed at the same regulation as some of these corporations are by different government agencies, whatever the case may be. And they figured out, well, we could probably hack them a whole lot easier than we could hack the actual company. Well, guess what? Now law firms are being highly attacked by a lot of corporate espionage, a lot of different type of organizations trying to obtain intellectual property or trademarks or whatever the case may be, or patents, because they realize the legal vertical is not being held to the same level of standards as other verticals in securing data. And there's no regulatory government agency, particularly at this time, that, or no board at this time saying, well, this is what you have to do to protect your client's data. And right. Because of that, they have a lot of, people trying to get to their information because they know that's the sweet spot, the biggest vulnerability for a lot of these corporations. And so, you have to, go ahead.
So I was going to say, Thomas, kind of what I'm getting from this is there's kind of a lack of oversight on this matter, and not to mention, it seems that a lot of the legal vertical kind of seems like to be the weakest link in the, the security chain, so to speak. Would you say?
Absolutely. At this particular point, that is the weakest link to the security chain for protecting information for clients.
Well, what are those reasons? Why is that the case? Because let's face it, I mean, law firms, can range from a single solo practitioner all the way to, mid-size, small to mid-size, and they have fixed amount of IT budget. And there's only so much you can do with that IT budget and allocate it to security. You can get probably a very good business class firewall. You can put some good intrusion prevention and antivirus solutions at the desktop level. But let's face it, I mean, how many law firms out there have two-factor authentication where they require their users to, have two types of challenge questions, and just like the banks do? How many have that? Very, very few that we have looked at on-premise, or they have encryption, of data, or even logging of file audit logging and things of that nature. It just doesn't exist. It's just not possible. And what I wanted to mention is that a lot of people think that cloud computing is less secure, and they hear it from their IT folks, or just in general, they feel scared when the data is not on-premise. The good thing the cloud provider in this scenario is cloud provider is able to invest in these technologies and has the security features already in place because of the magnitude and the volume number of users that we host on our cloud computing platforms. So in a sense, when you go from an on-premise environment to a cloud environment, you are going to get more security than you have today or can afford to implement on-premise. So keep that in mind. It's something that you don't really think of it that way, but you do get more security than you get on-site, and you're shifting the risk to a large extent.
That's absolutely right. And that's, I think, one of the biggest benefits is the ability to shift the risk. So, but anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Before you leave, I just want to go over this one thing. Coming up next time, our final installment in this series is going to be making, maintaining, and mandating policy. We're going to talk about the key to great policy making. I'll be joining along with Biren again on January 27th. Save the date, 2015, at 12 p.m. Pacific time. So please join us. We'd be more than happy to have you all join again. It's going to be a great event. We're going to go kind of elaborate on what I meant by what we spoke about earlier, effective policy. So join us for that. Also, one thing I wanted to cover before everyone leaves, our latest information booklet is out. It's available in both print and digital format. It's a great look into cloud computing in the legal industry. You want to see kind of the comparison. Where does cloud computing stand with the legal industry, specifically the security, storage, etc.? Please let us know, and we'll send you a copy, whatever format you'd like. We'll get it out to you. So, Biren, would you like to close for us?
No, I think I would like to thank the panelists, Thomas Slaughter, who's our CIO, and Patrick, who is our cybersecurity specialist. It's been great to share the podium with you guys and talk about such good information here. I learned quite a bit in the process as well, and I hope our audience did as well. We had a fantastic audience today, a lot of participation, and I hope you keep coming back to LevelCloud for other webinars, and invite your friends and things of that nature. We're also working to make our content as part, the credits. Patrick, I think you're working on it. So, anyways, thanks all for joining us, and I look forward to hearing with you or talking to you. Again, that's my information, so you can always email me if you have any questions. Thanks again, and hope you have happy holidays and a great rest of the year. And Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Okay, thank you, Patrick and Biren.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.